Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody's doing all right. Just out here to the dog park again, enjoying a little walking time, doing a little thinking. So hopefully this is coming at a good time for y'all. Also, happy Monday morning. So today's topic, tolerance training and neurodivergent perspective. Let's start with a joke. A bunch of number 8s were hanging around, and they needed to get something off the top shelf. And none of them were tall enough. So one turned to the other 8s and said, we need to tolerate. Anyways, all kidding aside, tolerance training in neurodiversity or neurodivergent perspective. Here's the thing. If you look at the research that's been conducted on tolerance, let's go across the board here. Let's go not just tolerance of stimuli, but also tolerance in other conditions in context. And in fact, my favorite example to use for this would be training at the gym. So you're at the gym, you're learning, you're conditioning your body to tolerate stressors. You're conditioning your body to lift more weights. You're conditioning your body to be able to go for longer without needing rest. You're conditioning your body to tolerate. That's what basically gym attendance is it's tolerance training. So you go to the gym and you need to do some tolerance training for your body, and you get a gym instructor, and this gym instructor, instead of being responsive to your needs, is treating you like you are a bodybuilder. Somebody who's been training for years and years and years and years. And so that gym instructor is pushing you and pushing you and pushing you and pushing you. And what happens to your body when you do that? Well, muscle starts breaking down. You start having adverse health effects. You start having all sorts of negative impacts to your physiological and mental health, because mental and physiological health are actually interconnected. And there's not really a huge separation. It's how is it expressing? But this is happening, and it's because this person who is a specialist that maybe you've hired, maybe it's included as a part of the gym membership, they're not responding to your physiological needs. Tolerance training is something that is really important, because when we train for tolerance, then that improves our stress responses. It makes us so that instead of something being considered dangerous or harmful, our body treats it as just another stimuli. So it turns it into basically an S delta, and sometimes even an SD, right? You see those people who are gym rats and they get excited to go out and and work out, and they get that endorphin rush and all those different things. But, there's some people who are like, working out, I can take it or leave it. It is, right? So it depends on what the person's reinforcers are. Preference is important. Reinforcer assessments are important. But when we're talking about tolerance training, if we're not responsive to the individual's phylogenetic needs, then we're going to cause harm. And in fact, a lot of times when I'm advising, supporting, because I do consultations and support work in addition to my regular day-to-day work. When I'm advising people who are struggling with a learner who is not taking to any sort of programming or training, I ask myself and I ask them, okay, so what are their physiological needs? What are their needs? And a lot of times the thing that is missing is that perspective of what are the stressors that they're currently dealing with? What are the challenges that they're currently facing? What are the things in their environment that are leading up to this? So this is where we need to do more than just basic ABC data taking. We need to look at the MOs. So I call that ABC plus data, because you're looking at motivating operations, and MOs can be before, after, and during. So ABC plus, right? Just for those who don't know, MOs, motivating operations, a quasi AKA is setting events. But for a little history for you, setting events were the first theory trying to identify what motivating operations are, but motivating operations are more operant. And so therefore they're a little bit more scientific in how we're describing and whatnot. So if you use setting events, technically that's an AKA, but technically it's not. But the point is that you're trying to identify the motivating operations, the establishing operations, AOs, for certain behaviors, and the evoking operations, my bad, for EOs, for stimuli, and the AOs, the abolishing operations. So what is likely to increase or decrease the behavior? And for those who don't know, a motivating operation by definition is something that increases the probability of behavior occurring and or increases the reinforcing or punishing effect of consequences. So when we're talking about tolerance and tolerance training, if you're walking in like that gym instructor with the years and years and years of experience that you have of training on how to tolerate certain aversive or difficult stimuli, and you walk up to this brand new person at the gym and you place a demand for them to lift 180 pounds, that's going to cause problems. Literally, it's going to cause problems. But if instead you're a good gym instructor, right? You're walking in and you're looking at and you're assessing the person's own physiological needs. You're addressing their needs and what they need to have addressed to be able to help them out. Then what you're doing is you're shaping toleration. Now, here's the thing. Negative effects of overstimulate or overexposure to toleration training is that it's going to increase sensory overwhelm. It's going to increase the probability of depression. It's going to increase stress responses. It's going to make it so that that stimulus is extremely punishing. It's going to have the opposite effect of what you intend. And here's the thing. Skinner had it right every single time that he said, the rat is always right. Now, I'm not saying that our learners are rats. But what I am saying is what Skinner was saying was the organism that is experiencing the stimulus is right because that's their experience. That's what they're dealing with. So real quick, I'm going to take a break from this and talk about something else real quick. You may have seen my shirt. It says explanatory fiction scare me. This shirt is available on legendmasters.com. It's one of my designs. Me and my business partner put this together. So it's in preparation for the holiday. And also, if you support me on Patreon, you can actually access some exclusive designs that are going to be available exclusively through Patreon first, before I publish them to the Legend Masters account for purchase, and my Redbubble account. I do both just because, people are aware of Redbubble. So there you go. But if you want something fun, stay tuned because I've got a few very fun, Halloween and autumn designs that are about to come out, and, Patreon supporters can access those. So, jump on that if you would like. So the Patreon, account is, on my link in the profile. So there you go. All right. So back to tolerance and toleration training. So, what we're trying to do is shape toleration and toleration response, right? Exposure and response prevention is actually a very effective approach for addressing things like phobias, for reconditioning stimulus. So that way it's either, a neutral or even is a signal reinforcement. And in fact, one of my favorite examples of reconditioning stimuli is reconditioning correction. Like for me, I did this for me. This is something I did for myself. I reconditioned correction so that it's a signal of reinforcement because I would rather have the correct information and use that to my benefit than to look at the stimulus of a correction as being negative or harmful, right? So that's an example of applying that to ourselves. When we learn to correct and we learn to take stimulus and apply it, then that can be beneficial. And that's a tolerance training. You're learning to tolerate a stimulus that previously was aversive. Well, let's go a step further. When we're working with a learner who's dealing with tolerance, a need for toleration, right? We got to look at everything that's happening in the environment. We need to identify what matters to this learner. We need to try to, obviously we've got limiters because we can't know everything that's happening. But we need to try to identify what are some things that have impacted this behavior. What are some things that created that learning history? What are things that are going on currently in their environment? Hey, while we're at it, caregiver coaching and training is really important. What are the caregivers having to tolerate? What are the caregivers' exposure like? These are all motivating operations that increase or decrease the probability of certain behaviors occurring and increase or decrease the reinforcing or punishing value. So it's complex. It's not a one size fits all. And that's one of the reasons why when I hear people say, oh, toleration training, it's unethical, it's not neurodiversity affirming, I go, all or nothing. I don't know. Like there's a time and a place for it. It used to be that I hated the gym because I did not have people who taught me how to move correctly when I was doing gym work. And I did not have people who were responsive to my physiological needs and differences and my learning history. And so, when I went to the gym, like before I had exposure to a trainer who was actually a very experienced, knowledgeable, I think he had just certified as a therapeutic trainer even, which is super cool. Prior to that, the gym was very much aversive for me. And so for me, going to the gym was an exercise in feeling inadequate. It was an exercise in exposing myself to pain and getting hurt. And it just was the opposite of fun or enjoyable. But when I worked with a trainer who I kept telling him, you're actually a behavior analyst, dude. He thought it was hilarious when I said that. But when I worked with this trainer, Total Body Works out of Colorado Springs, John, hi John, if you're watching this, what John taught me to do was to gradually build up my tolerance level. And the thing is he identified my strengths, the areas where I was able to tolerate the most. And we worked on those areas first. And then we built in additional tolerance training and my muscles built up. And now I can go to the gym independently, or I can even when I'm doing yard work or landscaping work, because I actually enjoy doing a little bit of landscaping here and there. I know it sounds a little nuts, but that's me. When I'm doing it now, I'm more noticing my body, my muscles, what I'm engaging, how I'm breathing, how I'm holding my shoulders, how I'm holding my neck, what I'm doing with my muscles. And that was toleration training. I was exposed to toleration training that benefited me. And the reason it worked was because John didn't just have me walk through the door and start throwing toleration training activities at me. He identified the areas where I had strengths and where I had weaknesses and focused on those strengths and gradually built out and shaped my toleration. So that way, now I can go to the gym and I won't be hurt, or less likely to. I can still make mistakes. We can all make mistakes, right? But I'm engaging those parts of my body that are more likely to be successful. Well, the same thing goes with our learners, the people that we work with. Is if we just walk in and presume that we know and yeah, this person has to have this XYZ, they just need to learn how to tolerate. Then what we're doing is we're creating negative side effects. Now, there is some early research that was done on tolerance that showed that if you overuse hearing protection, that it's actually going to increase sensitivity. Since then, that has been quasi-debunked. And there's additional research on this. And that quasi-debunking is that, one, there are hard limiters on what we can and can't tolerate. So if you're constantly exposing yourself to high decibels, using the hearing example, you're going to lose hearing. it's going to cause deafness. So the answer is that there's extremes, right? But the other side of it is that there's also some sensory sensitivity differences relating to different neurotypes. It turns out that the autistic neurotype has a higher concentration of something called von Economo neurons, VEN neurons, or spindle neurons. Those are the AKAs for von Economo neurons. And these neurons are associated with sensory processing. And autistic and possibly ADHD, we're still learning and we're still researching on this because it's a fairly recent discovery. But autistics tend to have anywhere from 2 to 4 times more von Economo neurons in the core areas where sensory processing occurs. And if you want to learn more about it, if you go to mindfulbehaviorllc.org, I actually have an entire presentation seeing neurodiversity through a behavior science lens, which I go into a lot of detail, and I'm planning on doing an update. Good morning. Howdy, Angelise. Good to see you. I'm planning on doing an update for that because I've read some additional research and found some additional information and resources on this. So there will be an update, and anybody who purchases the Seeing Neurodiversity Through Behavior Science Lens presentation, when the update goes through, one, we'll do a live for it so people can participate. And if you've already paid for it, you'll have access to it. And two, if you've already, like even if you can't attend the live, the recording will be made available because we're just going to update it. So science updates, my presentations and continuing education presentations are updating as well. The website is mindfulbehaviorllc.org. If you go into my link in the bio, link pop, mindful behavior is linked in there. And I think I may have even linked that specific presentation, in there as well. So it's a resource that I think is really essential, because we as behavior analysts, the majority of us, well over 70% of us, I don't remember the exact stats, so I'm just going to say well over 70%. You're welcome. We work with autistics and other neurotypes. And so if we're going to be walking in and being trainers, like I actually prefer that analogy versus thinking of us as medical, because that's what we're doing. We're teachers. We're scientist teachers. We use research and evidence base to teach to the individual. Individualized single subject case design, individualized education. That's what we do. Like literally, we analyze and customize learning to the individual with the objective of generalization, with the objective of shaping things so that the individual can be successful. Well, I'd like to add an additional perspective on top of that. Our job also is to be ambassadors. The vast majority of behavior analysts, we work with autistics. You do not need to be neurodivergent. You do not need to be autistic to be neurodiversity affirming in your practice. You can learn these skills, learn how to see these things, and learn how to help. Just like a gym trainer doesn't have to be a newbie all the time. A gym trainer doesn't have to have physiological or neurological differences. A gym trainer can learn these skills and learn how to be responsive to the people that they're supporting. And guess what? Oh, by the way, Kaylee says hi. This is my puppy, Kaylee. Cammie said hi earlier. Like when it comes to the things that we're doing with our learners, like we can be responsive to what their needs are, and we can know how to shape our practice. And this is scope and competence. Our scope of practice and our scope of competence is essential. And this is one of the reasons why in our ethics code, which I feel like is very poorly reinforced, and frankly, it's a lot of nice words without the resources for it, which is one of the reasons why we're trying to change the way we're doing things. There's a whole crowd of folks who are trying to provide coaching and mentorship as something I do. There are others who do it as well. My friend Ashton Benedict does. My friend Mary O'Brien does. Like Mindful Behavior has a whole bunch of the consultation work and whatnot. So like we're available to help answer these questions. And you know what? I am by no means an expert. I actually hate the term expert. I prefer specialist because expert implies that I know everything I need to know, but a specialist means, oh no, I know a lot, but I'm also constantly learning. And that's key. That's key to the process. I have consulted with, in the last 6 months, I don't know the exact number, but it's definitely in the double digits, low double digits, mind you. But I've been consulted with others who have knowledge and expertise, experience, specialization, if you will, in these things. And that's the reason why we need to have a community of practice. That's the reason why we need to interact and engage with each other. And some of those consults have been paid consults. Some of those consults have been trade in kind. Like when we're training our behavior analysts in training, and our RBTs, like we need to make sure that we're focusing on teaching these really relevant real world skills for application so that we can build that perspective changing, taking and improve our science. You know, I actually, have quite a few disagreements with other behavior analysts, on some of the approaches, mostly the approaches relating to, them presuming certain things and the privilege that they presume and the approaches that they take. But here's some things that I have some agreement with quite a few of them. And that is that we do need to improve our training systems. We do need to improve our communities of practice. And how we do that is we stop playing stupid hierarchical bullshit games. We stop publishing hit pieces and papers, throwing shade at each other, and we start actively engaging with each other. We start teaching each other. Right now, in the field of behavior analysis, we have had an overexposure to tolerance training in our field specifically. And I mean, behavior analysts, us. And it was an unintentional tolerance training overexposure, and it's resulted in our field being very reactive and people being worried and fearful of condemnation and judgment. And, unfortunately, due to algorithmic things and also some of my own behavior, I've been a contributor to this overexposure, and have caused harm. So this is me correcting. This is me saying, hey, maybe we need to make our community psychologically safe. So if you reach out to me or reach out to any of the folks who are in my community of practice, then I'm actively inviting you to be a participant in this, by the way. Know that we're not going to jump on your case. We're not going to judge you, condemn you, tell you you're an abusive piece of shit, whatever. Like, we're going to actively be engaging in problem solving and being behavior analysts. Because the reality is that our community needs to be psychologically safe. We need to be able to practice together. Does that mean that you might have to own that you screwed up and made some mistakes? Yes, I've had to. We all have to. It's a part of the process. And also know this. If you're willing to step forward and learn, if you're willing to try to figure out ways of engaging with your community, if you're willing to be a participant with your learners, if you're willing to try to see from their perspective and engage in some empathy, instead of placing all the empathetic requirements on the learner. That's the double empathy problem. If you haven't looked it up, I highly recommend it. If you're looking to improve, know that this community is a community where we are here to support and to help, and we want you to be a part of it. We want you to be an active member of it. We want you to be able to learn the skills you need to learn to start perpetuating it. Because the only way that we can change the way things are done is by actively engaging together, collaboratively, and problem solving. You can only know what you know. I can only know what I know. That's all we can do, right? And so when we make mistakes, when we screw up, when we say something or do something that's harmful, the best thing we can do is say, okay, I own that. I'll do better. I'll learn. I'll move forward. And then we can start making those changes. And it takes work and it takes effort and it requires some toleration training, right? But at the same time, we can't just throw people into the figurative deep end and expect them to just know how to swim. Because that's how we get exposure to traumatic things that turn into post-traumatic stress. And note what I said there and how I said it, because trauma is a word that's thrown around a lot, but that is not understood. And trauma is in reference to stimulus. Right? So I'll use an example. See this right here? This lovely little cut on the side of my finger that covers a fourth of my finger. That's a cut that went to the bone. It's old. It's healed. It's over 10 years old. But that cut to the bone that happened was a trauma. It was an exposure to a stimulus that caused harm to me. But this physical trauma did not turn into a psychological trauma for me, because I had years of experience that preceded that, years of training and toleration training. I'm going to work backwards from that toleration training. I had many years of first aid training. I have been a first responder, first on scene to at least 5 accidents. I can't remember the exact number. Prior to that, I had a first aid training again. I had little cuts and nicks and things like that during all that time. And the very first time that I had a cut, the very first time that I had some sort of physical trauma that occurred that was not this extreme. This is the most extreme I've ever experienced aside from in surgeries. When I first had that exposure to a scraped knee or whatever it was, the people in my environment, my parents, my siblings, they responded in a way that taught me how to respond. So instead of it being dismissing of my pain, they took it seriously. And instead of over responding to my pain, like, oh, no, you're hurt. Oh. Like, it was more like, oh, yeah, that hurts. Okay, well, we need to clean that out. We need to put a bandage on it. We need to X, Y, and Z, right? And so that I had years of experience and training, being exposed and building my tolerance up so that when this cut happened, instead of me freezing, I had been trained to know what to do. And so I felt the cut happen. I saw the cut had occurred. I reached out and grabbed it and made sure to prevent any bleeding. And I went and I took care of it and I got engaged in support. And this is now fully healed. And I have some minor nerve damage, but like it's functional. It's working. And in fact, I can use my hand perfectly fine now. Like, yes, do I have artifacts of that trauma exposure? Yes, but I don't have the psychological trauma exposure. I'm not scared of knives. I'm not scared of pie cutters because what had happened, it was a pie cutter that had a knife blade on it and I didn't realize it. And, long story short, I was using the pie cutter incorrectly. Even if I had known that if there had not been a knife blade on it, I should have been using it right. But you know, that's the point, is like, it's a learning process. And that's what we need to do, is think about it from that perspective, that learning and growing, building upon skills perspective. Because when we do that, what we're doing is we're building the ability not just to tolerate, but building ways for people to be able to expand their universe. When we have post-traumatic stress responses, that's a narrowing of our experiences. That's a response to stimuli. And that's because the individual, due to a variety of factors, from not having the skills to their own unique physiological characteristics, they're responding to that stressor in that way, and they're adapting. That's actually what post-traumatic stress is an adaptation to stimuli. And post-traumatic growth, which is little talked about, but is really essential, is the same thing. It's an exposure to a stimuli, right? And then the person taking that stimuli and responding to it and building out more responses and skills and shaping. So shaping is key. And the intensity of exposure is key. We can't just presume that because somebody needs toleration training that we start with lifting 100 pounds or I think it's like 60 kilos roughly is what that is. We can't just drop in and say, oh, hey, you're coming to the gym. You want to work out. You want to build your muscles. All right, cool. Let's just throw you on the bench press. Like we gotta teach how to hold the bar correctly. We gotta teach how to squat correctly. We gotta teach all the micro movements. We gotta make sure we got the core stability. There's so many things that are building up to this. And when we're doing that with a learner, when they're already in a point of exhaustion, that causes problems. And so, the neurodivergent perspective and understanding that constant exposure to aversive stimulus can have negative side effects. Okay. So how do we shape improved responsiveness? Oh, okay. Cool. We can do that. But what else? What about if they're overexposed? Okay. So then we start doing some antecedent interventions and we start identifying what we can do to improve the individual's environment so that instead of them being a raw nerve that's overexposed constantly, we can build up their skill sets. And part of building up skill sets is first you have to have recovery. If somebody comes from a situation where maybe their arm was in a cast for an extended period of time and they've lost muscle mass, or hey, maybe they've never been exposed whatsoever and they need to build up on that. Okay, we got to make sure that we're being responsive to that. A therapeutic gym instructor would take those things into account. And we're behavioral therapeutic gym instructors. Our job is to shape, is to help, to build, to create. And yes, certain target behavior reduction is an issue as well. And if we focus on building up skills-based training, and we focus on giving the tools the individual needs to be successful. And a part of giving the tools the individual needs is shaping their environment, shaping their community. We've over-focused on independence and under-focused on community and connection. If we focus on community and connection for the individual, because none of us are truly 100% independent, then we can shape those skills, and generalization occurs. And we build and build and build. And as we build and as we improve on our knowledge set and our skill set, as they improve on their knowledge set and skill set, as they start engaging in positive behavioral traps that lead to more learning, to more growth, to more understanding, then their world broadens and expands and they have access to more. But that can't happen if when they walk into the therapeutic gym, that we presume that there's something wrong with them and that we need to fix them. Oh, you need toleration training. Okay. And what are the needs that lead up to that? So thank you for joining me for this lovely rant. Again, if you can support me on Patreon, patreon.com/beardedbehaviorist. Legendmasters.com has a lot of my designs, like this one here, Explanatory Fiction Scare Me. I have some Halloween designs that are going to be going up exclusively on Patreon before they're published on Legend Masters. So please, by all means, support if you can. I'm working on building out other options available as well. So in the next few days, I'm gonna have a few ways that you can support in addition to that. And of course, if you go to mindfulbehaviorllc.org, you can access a lot of continuing education, supports, community of supports. A little disclaimer, the Mindful Behavior website, we're working on fixing a lot of issues with it because we've been experiencing some pretty big technical issues due to some bugs. So if you have any issues, feel free to reach out, and I'm more than happy to help with supporting those things. And we're working on getting the website stabilized so that way people can access that learning easier. But regardless, that's what we're here for. We're trying to build our community of practice. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful day.